Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Tech Talks with Santosh. And today we have a really special guest, Sam Julien from Auth0. And I've wanted to actually have Sam from a long time, but yes, finally I have him on the show. So thanks a lot for joining, Sam.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's hard to believe that it was just about a year ago that we were actually hanging out in person in Delhi
Yeah,
and Agra. Of course, my Apple Photos and Google Photos are taunting me with pictures of GraphQL Asia and NG India and all the travel I did in between. And it's good memories, but it's sad right now to not be able to
yeah,
do
actually.
anything or go anywhere. That
Uh,
was such a great trip.
Now you even cannot leave your own city. So it's like, forget about
Yeah,
traveling to another country.
yeah,
That's really sad.
yeah, yeah. My state is still pretty locked down. I've had some. I think some other states are starting to open up. I've had a few friends travel a
Uh-huh.
little bit, but I haven't gone anywhere outside of Washington or Oregon in the last year. Um, But one of the guys on the team is in Australia, and Australia did a much better job than the US of
Yeah.
following everything. So he actually took a trip recently to just another place in Australia, but he said it was a uh really good for his mental health to finally be able to
Uh-huh.
travel somewhere again. I was
Is
jealous.
it Ben?
Yeah, Ben. Yeah, Ben.
Okay.
Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
I had a call with him. Yeah. Cool.
yeah.
Let me just introduce Sam to you. So Sam Julien is actually a DevRel Manager at Auth0, and he's also an Egghead instructor and a Google GTE, as well as writer and speaker. And you may be actually aware of his uh, weekly newsletter, developer microskills.com, microskills. In case you are not and you have not subscribed to it, please go ahead and do that and thank me later because it's really useful. I get it weekly in my inbox, and I'm glad I have subscribed to it because it solves a lot of issues which I actually think about in my daily developer life. And here is the answer. So just go ahead and subscribe to it. And there
Thanks.
are also, yeah, Sam, go ahead.
I was just gonna say thanks for the shout out on the newsletter. It's really like one of my favorite things I'm doing these days because it's
Uh,
just writing and getting things out there that have been. It's all speaking from experience. It's not theoretical. It's like things that I've struggled with
yeah.
that I'm trying to pass on to other people to maybe save them a little time and frustration.
Thanks a lot for doing that because every week when I get it in my inbox, I was like, okay, like looks like Sam reads everyone's mind and then sends it. So it's really useful.
That's
Cool.
great.
And also, you can actually, he also has some courses on Angular. And there was a book he launched last year, actually, which is Getting Started in Developer Relations. It was really nice book. And in case you're looking forward to get into DevRel or even not, right? Uh, I think go ahead and just buy this book. This is really a nice book for everyone who is part of the community, how you can build community. There are a lot of interesting things in the book. And he has few courses, which I'm just sharing here, upgrading AngularJS as well as the Agate course, which is available for Angular beginners.
Thanks.
Uh,
Yeah.
yep, cool. So
Yeah,
this
I
is about Sam. I mean, a lot of things to share.
I
Yes,
know.
Sam.
When when you share it all in sequence like that, it's like wow, I've really been busy the last couple of years. um, but yeah, that Angular Basics playlist on Egghead has gotten a lot more traction than I thought it would. I just was I built it just doing it's I kind of built it one lesson at a time, and it's not they're sort of loosely connected. They're not necessarily sequential, but I was basically trying to make some Angular lessons that are a little different than kind of the standard tutorial because I always felt like
Mhm.
some of the tutorials didn't that some of the official tutorials didn't really line up with like what learning Angular was like in the real world. And so I think there's 21 or 22 lessons on there, and it's totally free for everybody. But the response has been a lot better than I anticipated. I kind of just put it out there, and I've actually been really happy with. It seems like it's starting to get out there and help some people learn the wild world of Angular.
Yeah, yeah, agreed. Cool. Yep. So let's start with our first question. So, what is Auth0, or how you pronounce it? So people like, do you pronounce it as Auth0 or Auth0? I pronounce it as Auth0. So how you do pronounce?
Yeah, it is Auth0, and thankfully we finally rebranded. If you look on the new site, we finally added the slash through the 0.
Uh-huh.
We've all been begging them to do that because everybody says Auth0. So now there's no,
Uh-huh.
it's totally unambiguous. You can see there's a slash through it. So yeah,
Yeah.
Auth0, and it is basically we build like an authentication and authorization platform, basically.
Mm-hmm.
So it's when you go to build your application and you need to add your login system and your user management and your roles and things like that, instead of having to hand code it yourself, we have a bunch of different SDKs in different languages, and you can just drop in our SDK and configure a few things, and you're up and running and good to go.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
Okay.
that's
So
the spiel.
okay. Okay. So it's an identity management platform, right? So you can. So can you just explain more about identity management? What we generally do?
Yeah, for sure. So anytime you uh, go to a site and log in and you have a profile, that's the concept of identity. Basically, your kind of user profile and all that comes with that, whether there's like preferences for a site or data, that's all considered identity. And so
Mm-hmm.
identity management is basically um, how you set all of that up and how you store that data, and how users are able to log in, how they're able to change passwords, uh, setting up
Mm-hmm.
roles and permissions in an app. That's all kind of under the umbrella of identity management.
Oh, okay. Cool. Uh, so to actually implement this identity management, I think you have some SDKs which are available, right? So can you just explain a little bit about what are those SDKs and how, if possible, how we can integrate it?
Yeah, so we have a handful. We have a bunch of different SDKs in kind of all of the major languages and frameworks. So whether you're doing Python or Java or JavaScript or
Mm-hmm.
any of kind of the other big ones, we have an SDK for you. And the SDK is basically, what it does is it lets you add a login screen that we've already built for you, so you don't have to build a login screen. You can customize it through our dashboard, or our back end, but
Mm-hmm.
you basically just drop it in, and it provides you login, log out, session persistence, like when somebody refreshes the application
Mm-hmm.
or comes back another time, you can persist their session through that. Um, and so it sort of adds all those basic features. And so there's the SDKs for both the back end and the front end. So the back end will do things like go and ask Auth0 for the token, or decode the token, check for the validity of the token, that kind of thing. And the front end will do things like go and request the token and then send it back to like your API.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we've got you covered on both sides, both the back end and the front end side of a user logging in, or uh, trying to access protected data, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
And most of them you basically just install through npm or whatever the package manager of your language is, like NuGet and C# or things like that. And then we have our website has a dashboard that you log into, and you kind of set up all the configuration over there, and then just kind of use environment variables in the actual app, and that kind of is how it all wires up to Auth0 itself.
Okay. Cool. So it actually brings me to the next question which you have. So what about the data, right? So of course, when you do identity management, you will be saving a lot of user data. So what are the modes? I mean, is like your database is on premises or cloud? How you can manage it?
You can basically do whatever you want in that. We have a user store that we provide kind of by default, where we keep track of your we hold your user data, but that's actually just a default, and you can hook it up to whatever database you want. If you want to hook it into your existing database or a different database that you want to use, then you can set that up, and Auth0 will just pass the user session like through and persist to whatever database you tell it to persist to.
Okay. So in case
That's
I
always
want to use
a question I get at conferences, because a lot of people say that they don't want Auth0 to hold their user data, and you don't have to do that.
Okay, so I can just bring my own MongoDB instance and just plug in and start saving my data in my own database.
Right. Yeah.
And so how you do that? Basically, there might be some scripts which we may need to run before setting up everything, because you need to know, right, how to, I mean, what should be the schema, how the data will be saved. What about those?
Yeah, I mean, so there's of course many different ways that you can do it. We do have some tools to kind of help you set up. Like we have import and export tools and some scripts and documentation and stuff like that to help you set it up. And there's going to be different use cases for different types of databases and stuff like that. But basically, you would take care of setting up the database that you wanted to set up, and then we've got some tools to help you wire it up to Auth0 and that kind of thing.
Oh, that's cool. So let's take a question from Lars. So Lars has a question: why would I need Auth0 if I have Azure AD or Azure AD B2C?
So there's a couple different use cases. I mean, one would be like if you're trying to integrate your Azure AD system with a web app that you're using Auth0 for. So you'd be able to use if you're using Azure AD for like an internal thing, then you may not need Auth0, right? The problem that Auth0 solves is more of like you're building a different app and you need to connect like both external users and internal users. So you'd be able to have Azure AD as a like enterprise connection in Auth0, so that you'd be able to, navigate to the site and have different groups of users being able to log in. So it's a slightly different use case than Azure. So you'd be able to, connect your web app to being able to use Azure as the like user directory to be able to log in, similar to how you would use like Facebook login or Google login or Twitter login or something like that. So, so in a lot of ways, Auth0 can replace Azure AD, or Azure AD can be used by itself, or you can use them. You can use Azure as kind of like the source of authentication of the user's identity, similar to how you would use like Facebook or Twitter.
Oh, so that's nice. So basically, I can just integrate any third-party identity management system into an existing Auth0 system. So that's possible.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So like if there were if there were either features around, like if you were building a web app and you had a use case to where you wanted specific features of Auth0 for the web app, but your company was using Azure AD for everything, you could basically just integrate, you just tap into the Azure AD system, but then have Auth0 handle all of those features, like rules or whatever else you're trying to do with that's special for a web app that Auth0 would help you with. Now you don't need it if you're just doing an internal app that's only using Azure AD, right? Like if you're just logging in with Azure for an internal application, then that's its then you have a full circle, a complete circle there that you won't need it for.
Okay. So what about the latest technologies, like for example, Flutter? So you also have SDKs for Flutter as well, so people can integrate.
So we just recently, we've got a lot of interest in Flutter. I don't think we have an official Auth0 Flutter SDK yet. Let me paste an article that we just did though on Flutter. One of our, we have some guest authors that write about Flutter, and then one of our content team members is pretty big into Flutter. But the nice thing about Auth0, so this is any identity provider that follows the OAuth and OIDC specifications, which are just like basically just like a set of rules that describe how you're supposed to handle user management, and all of the big like names in this space, whether it's Okta or Firebase Auth or Cognito or Auth0, like all of us have to follow that core set of rules, and then all of the other like features and everything are just sort of like nice things added on top of that. So what's cool is that part of those specifications is you have these different endpoints that people use to access tokens and that kind of thing. So you actually don't necessarily need like an official Auth0 SDK to actually use the Auth0 identity provider. And so there's so a really good example of this is especially for Angular community is Manfred Steyer's Angular OAuth to OIDC library, right? So that is kind of a vendor neutral implementation of authentication and authorization for Angular. And so you can use Auth0 with Manfred's SDK that doesn't have anything to do with Auth0 specifically. It just means that you don't have some of the Auth0 like special things to it. So in the case of Flutter, I don't know if I haven't checked lately if we're building an official SDK or not. But you have a couple of options. You can still use OAuth and OIDC, like the same kind of setup that you would for a technology that we don't have an SDK for. And then we also have two APIs. One is the authorization API, and then one is the authentication API. I always mix up the name of the, but authentication API. That's right. So the authentication API, which is for all the like login and log out and all that stuff, and then the management API is like for all of the user management. You can do everything through API calls if you want. So you can implement kind of the basic login and log out stuff just using our APIs or using a regular OAuth OADC library, and then you can use the management API to do anything you would anything else. So like the official SDKs just kind of provide you these nice like abstractions and wrappers around these things to make it easier. For example, the Angular SDK, it comes pre-built with like an HTTP interceptor and a route guard and things like that, to where you don't have to do that stuff yourself. But any area that we don't have like an official SDK on, you can still use. Does that make sense?
Yeah, cool. I mean, so last is I have a public app, web app, though that's the context. So was it related to the question?
Yeah. So like kind of like I said, the idea is like if you have a public web app and there are features of Auth0 that you want, like its roles and permissions or extending the API or the universal login or whatever else, then you would basically treat Azure AD as the login provider, basically, just like you would use Facebook or Twitter or whatever else. And it would handle all the user management, but then you'd be able to use like the different features and SDKs and all of that stuff and connect it to, other APIs or other platforms that you're trying to do. So if you solely are needing just login and log out, then yeah, you don't need Auth0 on top of Azure AD. But if there are other things, other benefits that you want from an identity provider like Auth0, then you can connect them.
Okay. So if I remember in Auth0, I can actually go ahead and connect to any third-party provider just by clicking some, I think there is an admin tool or something where I can just check if I need, let's say, Google authentication or I need a Facebook authentication. Is it correct?
Yeah. So there's in the dashboard, and there's a couple different things. So in the dashboard, there's some of the basic ones where you basically just kind of flip a switch, and then for a lot of them, you have to go generate keys for them because they'll kind of default to developer keys. So if you're putting anything in production, like you'll have to go to Google or Facebook or whatever and actually generate like public or production keys that you would use. But from the Auth0 side, it's pretty much just kind of flipping a switch. And then we also have this thing called the Auth0 Marketplace that is sort of geared towards making it easier to do some of the like SSO integrations and things like that. Or I'll paste a link in for that. But so for example, if you were trying to set up single sign-on with like Cisco or different CRMs or Freshdesk, Google Suite, Heroku, like that kind of stuff, there's this marketplace that just you go through and you click on a few things and it walks you through how to set up the integration and how to install it and that kind of thing. That makes it's pretty nice. It's a lot more straightforward than it used to be with the marketplace.
Yep. So I've shared the link in chat, so you can refer to the Flutter integration as well as the library created by Manfred. So yep. So there is something which I can see on Auth0. I think something known as cloud deployments. What's that? So can you just talk a little bit about it?
Well, so are you just talking about kind of like in general the deployment options, or I mean, so basically like we have by default like most accounts like what we call self-service, which is either the free plan or like the developer plans, they're in like a public cloud to where I mean all the tenants are all the data is siloed and stuff like that, but it's one cloud for multiple organizations and things like that. And then as you need more security, then there's like a private cloud basically where your stuff is only on one single cloud. And a lot of like banks and healthcare and that like places like that need that kind of thing in order for different compliance. So we work with all the different kind of compliance and privacy things. So there's different options based on kind of how high up that chain you will need.
Okay, that's cool. So I can just have an like private cloud of mine where I can deploy an instance of Auth0 and I am the owner. So I'm not actually on the public cloud, which is generally if I start with testing APIs, right? So it's a shared cloud if I'm not wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it's still, it's still very secure and everything. It's just not things
Yeah.
like there's I don't know if this is a global thing, but there's something called PCI compliance
Yep.
in
PCI.
yeah, and so like there's things like that where you have to there's some requirements, and so for example, like for PCI compliance, like you can't be on a public cloud, you have to be on a private cloud and things like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Generally for banks, it's for every platform which deals with credit cards and debit cards. So, yep.
Yeah, I remember you've worked for banks before and stuff, so.
Yeah. I mean, it was so. I don't want to actually remember those days.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so okay, let's move on to the next question we have. So how developer can start with Auth0? So what are the plans, or from where they can learn more about the integration stuff?
So the nice thing is like our free plan is pretty great for most like any like kind of hobby project that you're working on, or like you just get an idea for an app or something. Like the free plan is very good. I mean, it supports a lot of users, probably more users than you'll need, and comes with all of kind of the basic features, and it's free forever. There's no, I mean, when you first sign up, there's a trial that includes some extra features, but then once that trial's over, the free plan lasts forever and won't ever go away. So if you have like a small app that you're building or something, it'll last you quite a while. And the best way to get started, we have these quick starts. I can drop a link in here. So we have these quick starts where you basically choose the type of app, and then you choose the um, like language or SDK, the language or framework or things like that. And then it just walks you through how to do the basic setup of like log in, log out, protecting the API, things like that. And the quick starts in the free plan will take you a really long way, like until you need like until you're building something that like you're starting to make money on, and you need like extra features like multi-factor things, or connecting to enterprise accounts and things like that. Like you'll go a ways on the free plan, and then when you start to need some of those features, we have like a developer and developer plus options, or developer where did I hold on, I had this pulled up. But we have a couple different options basically, and they're mostly distinguished by the features, and it's kind of more towards the like if you need to connect to things like Azure AD or things like that, those kind of more custom features, and compliance options and things like that. So and then the other way they are differentiated is with the number of active users, and this is an area people get kind of confused on. It's not like the total number. It's similar to Slack. If you've ever tried to pay for Slack, it's a similar process. Like it's not the total number of users in your database. It's the number of monthly active users, and that's how those plans get billed. So because a lot of times people, they want to sign up for a developer pro plan, but they see the number of users and they get kind of sticker shock, because they think that's how much, they look at the number of users in their database, which maybe is like several thousand, and they think that's what it's going to cost them, but it's actually however many are logging in regularly, which might just be like a couple hundred or something. So but like I said, most of the time those plans are going to be for people who are building a product, building some sort of app that they're, hopefully getting some sort of revenue from. Like you can stick with the free plan for a while as you kind of grow and figure things out. And then, move to that when you're kind of producing some revenue and that kind of thing. And then beyond that, there's like enterprise and all that stuff. But I figure most people listening like aren't going to be the people who are going to be like negotiating the enterprise contracts and all that stuff.
Yeah, I can see. I mean, free plan includes 7,000 users, so I think that's a lot.
Yeah, it takes most people a long time to outgrow that.
Yeah, agreed. So we have few questions from the chat. So Lars says he first time I heard about a free plan. I mean, even I was not aware. So I think I tried it 2 years ago, Auth0, because one of the open source projects where we were trying to use it, and then I realized, okay, it's free as well. So,
yeah, that's interesting. I didn't realize people didn't know that there was a free option. That's good to know. It's good feedback.
yeah. So this question was from Karthik. And Lars also had this question. So did we talk about Auth0 ambassador program? So can you just talk a little bit about this Auth0 program?
For sure. So the ambassador program is sort of it's a program for helping people learn developer relations by way of Auth0, basically. It started as a speaking program. And with COVID, we've just expanded it to be more inclusive of other types of content. So, writing or streaming or whatever else are all part of it. And so, basically in exchange for doing like, we give you training on how to do some of these things, whether it's on writing or speaking or identity, training, that kind of thing. We give people swag and, access to the team and that kind of thing. And depending on your kind of rate of contribution, we also, once things open back up, you'll be eligible for travel support. So if you're giving a talk somewhere on identity or security and the conference doesn't pay for your hotel and airfare, then we'll pay for that. We have that for like once you're sort of like an active contributing ambassador, then you become eligible for that. So yeah, it's a great program. A lot of people have there's about, I think we're up to like 140 people in like 36 countries. And it's pretty awesome because, our DevRel team is fairly small. There's only about 6 of us. And so we can only be in so many places at once. And so the ambassadors are really awesome. They have reached a lot of people in a lot of different places that we don't normally get to. And several over the last couple of years have used the ambassador program to become developer advocates. We've had a few recently that have gotten their first DevRel job and have credited the ambassadors program with some of that because it just gives people a way to get some experience giving talks or writing or things like that. I think for a lot of people, they they want to get started with writing or speaking, but they kind of don't know. There's too many different options of what to talk about, and so I think one of the benefits of the program is like we just give you ideas of what to do. You can just pick something. A lot of times you just need to pick something and do it, and so we give people a lot of ideas on like you could write about JWTs or you could write about this or that. It doesn't have to be specifically about Auth0, just about identity and security in general. I see Debbie has hopped in and said that it's a great program. I appreciate that. Yeah.
Says it must be a simple answer. So.
Yeah, it was started in towards the end of 2017, and yeah, it's been a really great. I really loved being involved with running it and growing it and stuff. I actually spent quite a lot of my time last year working on the program, especially since I had more time, since I wasn't traveling as much. We put a lot of time into like the processes and systems. And this year is really exciting because we're going to be, now that we've hammered down a lot of the systems and processes, we have more time to do more training and mentoring and that kind of thing. So it's going to be a really fun year. And we have you now, so even better.
I was about to say the same. So the biggest advantage is you can always every day almost you can speak to Sam. So that's the another extra added advantage. Thanks for giving the insights, Sam. Okay, so I'll just ask one more question. Actually, while we were discussing it, you said okay, the APIs are extensible, so I actually just, let's say, if I in future I create my own identity provider for, let's say, an example, not happening, but yeah. So, but let's say I create it, so I can plug in that with Auth0 as well.
Well, so there's sort of two different things going on. Like, one is the so there's the authentication side and the authorization side. And the authentication side is the proving you are who you say you are, which then results in a token being sent that is your identity. It's called an identity token, basically, and or an ID token is how you'll hear it. And then on the other side, there's the authorization side, which is that you have the permission to do whatever you're trying to do, like access an API, and that's a different token called an access token. So usually, I think people will mix these up because, like, when let's say you want to log in using Twitter or something, that's going to handle the ID token side of things, but not the access token side of things. So if you were to build something that you turned into like a social provider, then yeah, you'd be able to use that. You could probably integrate that in if it's compliant with the OIDC specification. Then you could integrate that in with Auth0. But if you were making something that was creating access tokens, then you don't really need Auth0 at that point. Like, then you're kind of handling that part yourself, because that's kind of the main function of Auth0 is to, like, if you've got an API and you want to lock it down for certain people, then Auth0 handles the creation of the token and verifying it and dealing with the permissions and that kind of thing.
That's good. So thanks for clearing that out. Cool.
Sure.
I think we are done with questions. We don't have any in the chat. And the next question is, do you want to promote anything here?
Yeah, there's there's a couple of things. I think I would guess that a lot of your listeners or viewers are Angular folks. And so I would give a big shout out to our Angular SDK that came out a few months back. It's legitimately great. Like, it's we had sort of an ongoing struggle with our Angular integration stuff, just because of the fact that Angular is so reliant on RxJS, where like most other JavaScript frameworks aren't. And so we've gone back and forth. When we first released some docs on Auth0 and Angular, it was all promise based, and a lot of people were upset because it wasn't, it was using async await and promises and that kind of thing, and it wasn't really idiomatic for Angular. So then we went the complete opposite direction and made everything observables, but it was elegant, but it was really difficult to read and maintain for people. We got a lot of feedback that it was like, if something was broken, for the average Angular developer, they're not, RxJS is really hard, and so this, I feel like, is we've struck the right balance of, it's idiomatic, it uses observables, but there's enough abstraction to where you don't have to worry about a lot. Like, we provide the service, we provide the auth guard, we provide the interceptor, and it just kind of works, and it's truly it's a nice SDK, and we're really proud of it. We also recently came out with a Next.js SDK. This was something that was sort of experimental for a really long time, but people people were asking us repeatedly whether we were going to actually do a like production capable SDK, and we've just come out with. I'm not sure if it's like the final release yet, but we're starting to make content and stuff about it. So I'm pretty sure it's out. Like, yeah, it's like we're version 1.2 now. So I think it's like official, or version 1.1. So it just recently came out. And that's going to be a big a game changer for people using Next.js. And then lastly, I'll just do a personal shameless plug. I'm launching a new book called The Guide to Tiny Experiments, which is a framework I've come up with to help people finish what they start. I think we've all been down the road of like starting a million side projects and then they sort of languish and we never finish them. And so I've been experimenting a lot over the years with how to, cross things off the list while also not working 80 hours a week. And so this book is about that, and it's going to be coming out at in about 3 weeks. So I've got a pre-sale up, and it's got a lower price, and I'll be sending out kind of early access to some of the material and some of the writing process and stuff like that. So, yeah. It's based on a lot of the same content that I've been sending out with the newsletter and that kind of stuff.
Oh, that's great. Okay. Yeah. So I think we are done with the questions. In case no, we don't have any questions in the chat as well. But yes, in case so Sam, in case anyone wants to actually discuss something with you, where they can reach out.
Yeah, Twitter is probably the most straightforward. Just my at Sam Julien, yeah, right behind you. That's kind of the central place that I communicate with people.
Okay, cool. Yeah. So yeah. So this is it. So in case you have any questions, feel free to reach out to Sam. Sam is one of the nicest guy I have ever met, and I was lucky to meet him so last year. But let's see when we can meet again. Probably next year. Now doesn't look like it's happening this year. And yeah, so that's it for the day. And we will meet again next Friday with another episode. And that episode is going to be on Flutter. So we will have another Flutter GD from India, and he's really, just a second. It's Flutter. So I just wanted to confirm if it's Flutter or not. So I'm sure if you have written a single line of code in Flutter, you may know about this guy. He's from India and one of the Google developer expert for Flutter. His name is second, just oh. So Sam, this is what you do, right? So when I talk to you, I just forget everything, even the names. So his name is Pawan Kumar. So I am sure you know Pawan Kumar. He's really a great guy. A lot of contents he's putting on for free on the various channels, and looking forward to have him on the next episode. Yep. So that's it. So see you next week, and bye bye. And
Bye,
thanks
everybody.
for joining.